the road to war, because those voices don't speak for the rest of us. You and I know and do not believe that life is so dear and peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery. Or should Moses have told the children of Israel to live in slavery under the Pharaoh? Should Christ have refused the cross? Should the patriots at Concord Bridge have thrown down their guns and refused to fire the shot heard round the world? The martyrs of history were not fools. And our honored dead who gave their lives to stop the advance of the Nazis didn't die in vain. Where then is the road to peace? Or the simple answer after all? You and I have the courage to say to our enemies, there is a price we will not pay. There is a point beyond which they must not advance.
Welcome to another episode of Freedom Radio.
What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life, that there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. Do you know what I'm talking about?
The Matrix.
Do you want to know what it is? The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
What truth?
That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind. Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
Is there any light at the end of the tunnel in Australia? Anything? So is it getting? It's getting darker.
It's getting darker. It's almost as dark as what it is in some Scandinavian country. That's all I'm saying. But it really is. The funny thing is, I'm still amazed how much news gets over to places like Sweden and America. I really am, because they try and shut everything up here. The quarantine camps, every single state has one at the moment, Northern Territory especially. But now, even here in South Australia, where I live, there was an article that came out recently where it talks about they've set up a homeless camp now on the Adelaide Oval. And they've got one in this other city's area called Port Augusta. And the homeless people they're actually locking up on there for quarantining from this virus, supposed virus, is over here, is Aboriginals. So they're doing the same thing that they did in Northern Territory. They're locking away the Indigenous, and they're doing the same thing here in South Australia. And they're being very selective with who they're locking up. And it came out on the ABC, which is our national broadcaster, which is our pretty much leftist-leaning broadcaster. So the camps are in full swing. They're pretty much doing the whole vaccination of children now. as young as 5 to 11, and they're now going into school and they're making it mandatory that your kids have to be vaccinated or they can't go to school. And there's a lot now that are going to be turning to homeschooling. There's many people that have lost their jobs overnight. It's got to the stage now where I think Australia is just over being the test case for the rest of the world to follow. It really is. Just even to get a normal job in a cafe, people are needing vaccinations. To get a job, you know, on a building site, you need a vaccination, all this sort of stuff. And I was speaking to a nurse from church the other day, and she turned around to me and she goes, "Oh, but it's not being forced." And I said to her, "So so give me the definition of being forced. You've got your job, yeah. Okay, so did you need a vaccination for that to keep that?" "Well, it's not forced, it's a requirement." And then she turns around, it's a requirement. And then she turns around and she goes to me, so I said to her, "So what about teachers? To be a teacher, you need a vaccination." She goes, "Oh, yes, but it's not being forced. It's a requirement." So I said, "Oh, so you're playing word semantics now." So this is what they do. They use word semantics and they change the definition to something that's a little bit less grating on the tongue. And they use that instead to justify their means. And that's exactly what's happened, even amongst some Christians, sadly. And it's just got to the stage now where I think, yeah, like I said before, Australia is over being the test case.
You know, a group of people decided that this was the right thing to do. But why? Okay, so when we think of it from a Christian perspective, we've seen this coming because that's what those people do. But from their perspective, they're obviously not in a Christian perspective. And normally when evil people do evil things, they think they're doing something good. So what, or at least good for themselves, good for their pocketbook or whatever. What is the end game? And do you think in their mind, what was the purpose? I mean, like maybe in a nuanced way. Why did they think that this would be a good idea to completely tear down the entire world and rebuild it?
If you go to 1984, there's a passage about how people's acceptance are much higher in a state of war. Like they accept rations and stuff like that because. So that's why you have these three states in 1984, and two are constantly in war with one, and it all changes, and none of them are strong enough to win. And it gets explained to the main character. This is actually a war on the citizens, not between the states. They need the kind of the extraordinary circumstance to get people more accepting of whatever. But I don't think it really works now. It feels like people are getting angry all over.
They definitely are, as they should. You know, I mean, Josh, yeah, if you want to add anything to that or on your perspective of it, like, you know, just why would any human being think this? Like, yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I think Carl just hit the nail on the head. He really did. I'm going to add to that a little bit. I think, why would anyone want to rebuild a society in their image? And I keep coming back to this. As Christians, we know what the Bible says about the beast system and everything. And, it's plain for all to see. You've got to be blind or not read your Bible to know what's going on. That's being set up before our very eyes. And not just that, and however that may look, this is just part of the whole grand scheme of things in the future. But why rebuild? I think it comes back to man is greedy, and it comes back to the heart of man. Man is greedy. Man is selfish. Man just wants to be like God. Man wants control. And so it comes back to this whole Tower of Babel sort of mentality where, we want to build ourselves up to be our and then replace God. And you look at the whole philosophy of Marxism, not socialism, but Marxism and communism and everything on the Karl Marx Manifesto. One of the things that he talks about is he wants to literally replace God. Now, I think that's at the root and the heart and the cause of everything in this. Man just wants to replace God. And all the 6 men, I'll say there's about 6 or 7 men that are really pushing this with the reset and everything. You know, none of them are believers. None of them are Christian. Every one of them are trying to create this utopian society, which has greed, their greed at the core of it.
Yeah, that's exactly it, because it, to create every tyrannical force in history, especially in the last couple hundred years, every time they try and create a utopia, well, there's a couple requirements in their utopia. The undesirables are not allowed because they are the reason why it's not a utopia. So we must get rid of the undesirables. Guess who the undesirables are? You, and me, and all the rest of everybody watching. You are standing in their way.
The state takes the place of God. The socialist dictatorships are religions, and state slavery is a form of worship. Since the birth of totalitarianism in the 20th century, much has been written about this form of rule, and millions have read George Orwell's depiction of it in the classic novel 1984. But what is often overlooked is that totalitarianism is more than just a political system. It is a fanatical religion, and this religion is spreading across the globe with a ferocity not seen since the mid-20th century. In this video, we are going to investigate the religious nature of totalitarianism in the recognition that we must know our enemy if we are to defeat it. Shortly after fleeing Nazi Germany, the political scientist Waldemar Gurian wrote the following: "The totalitarian movements that have arisen after the First World War are basically religious movements. Their aim is not only to change political and social institutions, but also to remodel the nature of man and society." Totalitarianism shares many characteristics with organized religions. For example, Christianity and Islam are built on the belief of a future golden age that will be ushered in with the second coming of Christ. Totalitarian movements share a similar idea, but instead of a god or prophet that transforms the world, totalitarian movements are built on the belief that man can recreate the world, and a new golden age can be constructed under the direction of the all-powerful and all-controlling state. In consequence of the decline of Christianity, writes Carl Jung, the religious projections have largely fallen away from the divine figures and have necessarily settled in the human sphere. The modern, enlightened intellect cannot imagine anything greater than those tin gods with totalitarian pretensions who call themselves state. This belief that it is possible for a centralized, all-powerful state to radically change society for the better is why Hannah Arendt wrote that totalitarianism is not a government in any traditional sense, but a movement.
And they think it is better to get rid of you for the common good.
The totalitarian movements of the past, this golden age was envisioned to be one of racial purity, or a communist utopia of equality, efficiency, and prosperity for all. Today, this totalitarian golden age is one in which mankind exists in harmony with Mother Earth, or in its more extreme form, an age where man merges with machine and transcends biological limitations of disease and death. Needless to say, totalitarian utopias never come to fruition, for as Karl Popper warned, the attempt to make heaven on earth invariably produces hell. These utopian visions do, however, succeed in stimulating the religious enthusiasm of the masses, and totalitarians use these visions to convince the population that the utopian end justifies any and all means, be it mass surveillance, censorship, widespread oppression, mass imprisonment, or even the extermination of groups of people, or as Barry Goldwater explains, those who seek absolute power, even though they seek it to do what they regard as good, are simply demanding the right to enforce their own version of heaven on earth. And let me remind you, they are the very ones who always create the most hellish tyrannies. Absolute power does corrupt, and those who seek it must be suspect and must be
Shall
opposed.
not want for nothing. He makes me lie down in the green pasture. He greases up my
I know you're out there.
Because
He
those
gives me
voices
kung
don't
fu
speak
in the
for the
face
rest
of my
of us.
enemy.
You and I
know that you're afraid.
and do not believe that life
You're afraid
is so
of us.
dear and peace so sweet.
You're
as to be
afraid of
purchased at
change.
The price of change and slavery.
I don't know the future. I didn't come here to tell you how this is going to end. I came here to tell you how it's going to begin. I'm going to hang up this phone, and then I'm going to show these people what you don't want them to see. I'm going to show them a world without you. A world without rules and controls, without borders or boundaries. A world where anything is possible. Where we go from there is a choice I leave to you.